The moment our eyes met in the dimly lit corridor, I felt a palpable shift in the atmosphere. It revealed itself in a surprising manner. It was never sought, yet it came to pass. The son of my husband, his presence in this house was intended to be of little significance to me. He existed only as a whisper amidst the mysteries that hung in the air. Yet that gaze, steadfast and scrutinizing, unlike a son's look at a stepmother, left me frozen in place. The memory of that day remains etched in my thoughts with striking clarity. My husband had just left for yet another work trip, leaving behind the familiar silence that I had grown accustomed to. The house stood as a vast presence, resonating with unspoken mysteries, stripped of true essence, embellished with carefully chosen decor and opulent details, yet lacking a certain warmth, passion, and intertwined fates. I lost myself in everyday tasks, searching for comfort, in the well-known desire to dispel the unease that remained from earlier. Still, it lingered as a haunting presence. His gaze lingered, altering the very atmosphere that surrounded us. Everything was intentional, carried a profound meaning. As I moved gracefully through the living room, I discovered him lingering by the bookshelf. His arms were folded, and his form exuded a sense of ease. There was an intensity in his gaze that sent shivers down my spine, not from fear or disgust, but from a place far more dangerous. Longing. He was conscious. He experienced it too. I whirled around quickly. Nevertheless, the damage had already established itself. It had nestled within my mind, growing, twisting, waiting patiently. It started as a simple spark, subtle shades of understanding. I felt his presence the moment he came back. Every movement he made captured my attention, igniting a spark that felt illicit. The stillness that lingered between us buzzed with unexpressed tension. No longer an emptiness, but a brewing tempest. I told myself it was just a passing notion, that I was ensnared in a tangle of daydreams, that after years of my husband's indifference, I was simply mistaking basic human compassion for something more profound. Yet typical concentration never sent such chills down my spine. It held my thoughts firmly at bay from the allure of temptation. The moment of truth, the one that could not be reversed, came days later. I stood in the kitchen, absorbed in the simple act of rinsing a glass, when I felt his presence envelop the room. The atmosphere was heavy with hidden realities, and I felt it all without needing to look. The well-known awareness, that recognizable spirit, a thrill coursed through my skin, excitement buzzing in the atmosphere before I even thought to look over. He strolled to the fridge, pulled it open, and grabbed a bottle of water, a familiar action, an experience I had faced repeatedly in the depths of longing. Yet, on this occasion, it seemed distinct. The atmosphere buzzed with hidden longings. The silence wraps around me, thick and electric, as though the atmosphere is concealing mysteries just beyond my grasp. In a fleeting burst of impulsive freedom, I turned, a seamless interplay of machinery. Yet, the moment our eyes met, it was as if time paused, suspended in a delicate stillness. Neither of us had the courage to move. The air around us was heavy with unspoken truths, a palpable tension that sparked with each look exchanged. I should have looked away. I should have paused for a moment. Nevertheless, I held back. He didn't either. For a brief instant, his eyes conveyed a challenge, as though beckoning secrets to swirl in the atmosphere. A test. Shall I have the audacity to face the reality of the emerging spectacle? Could I truly overlook its existence? I turned my gaze away initially, not out of shame, nor from fear. To look deeper would have uncovered the reality, and I was not ready to provide one. I faced the sink again, my hands trembling with a hidden excitement, as I washed the glass again, even though it was already spotless. Still, I knew this was far from over. This was just the beginning. I persuaded myself that it was merely a product of my imagination, that I was exploring too deeply into moments that bore no real importance. Yet beneath the surface, I knew the truth. His presence in the house enveloped me in a captivating awareness that awakened something profound within. Every shift, every glance, every brief moment of intimacy echoed with a depth that felt nearly tangible. The emptiness created by my husband's absence intensified the darkness that remained. The emptiness he fashioned transcended simple lack. It was infused with longing. For many years, I hid behind a facade that masked the void consuming my spirit. Up to that moment that morning, I forced myself to don a facade of normalcy. I floated along, merely going through the motions. Enigmatic whispers of a dark elixir, unveiling hidden truths. Still, my hands shifted with a clumsiness that seemed entirely inappropriate. My thoughts wander without direction. The recollection of that look from the previous night lingered in my thoughts, reverberating endlessly. The weight of his gaze hung heavily in the atmosphere. A tight coil of sensation formed in my stomach in response. It was never intended to develop like this. He was never intended to etch a trace upon my spirit. I decided to establish some space. I ventured outside the house. I drifted to the grocery store, wandering through the aisles, staying longer than necessary, gathering items that served no true function, anything to delay the unavoidable journey back. However, the allure proved too powerful to withstand for an extended period. When I got back, he was sprawled in the living room, his fingers dancing across his phone screen, one arm casually draped over the back of the couch. He barely recognized my arrival, his eyes fixed on something beyond, and for a brief moment, I felt a pang of absurdity. Maybe it was merely a creation of my mind. Maybe I found myself entangled in a maze of my own reflections. As I moved by, his voice cut through the quiet air. "Do you need help with something?" I hesitated, my heart racing at the enticing manner in which he asked. The words twirled playfully. The tone was superficial. I turned, meeting his gaze. "Of course, I completely understand." A silence hung in the atmosphere, thick with unexpressed realities. We stayed completely motionless. He nodded, a quiet understanding lingering in the atmosphere before shifting his focus back to the light of his phone. Yet I felt it profoundly, the change, the certainty that my thoughts were not simply figments of imagination. Sleep slipped through my fingers that night. I dwell in the gloom, my eyes locked on the silhouettes overhead. My thoughts intertwined in a captivating waltz. My body trembles with eager expectation. I despised how my mind perpetually drifted back to him, to his alluring whispers, to the way his eyes seemed to linger on me. I discovered that I was ensnared in a tangle of denial, maintaining that it was merely a passing mirage. Yet beneath the surface, I remained conscious. The hour had quietly faded, shadows thickening around the reality. The morning light crept in gently, and I awoke, longing to escape his shadow. I delved into the kitchen, preparing breakfast, my hands moving with intention. As I reached for a glass in the cabinet, my fingers faltered, sending it spiraling into disarray. The sharp sound of shattered glass echoed through the area. I remained motionless, whispering quiet curses under my breath. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps reverberated through the air. He stepped into the kitchen, his eyes immediately drawn to the broken glass on the floor. "Are you doing okay?" His voice oozed with a seductive quality, tinged with the traces of sleep. A quiet nod slipped past my lips, truly somewhat uncomfortable. He crouched down, his fingertips grazing the sharp edges just before I could step in. I grasped his wrist, my fingers tracing the contours of his skin, a mistake cloaked in darkness. The moment our skin touched, a jolt of electricity surged through my veins. His body tensed beneath my fingers, an unspoken vow hanging in the atmosphere. In that fleeting moment, a captivating thrill lingered in the atmosphere, and neither of us had the courage to shatter the enchantment. In that fleeting moment, I let go of my hold. Silence surrounded him, a dense veil of unexpressed reflections. He had no duty to fulfill. The ambience enveloping us conveyed a great deal. He stood upright, tossing the broken pieces into the trash. In quietude, he turned and slipped away into the darkness. I remained in that instant, my fingers tingling with the recollection of his touch, my heart pounding fiercely. This was a reality I could no longer escape. This was indisputable. In the midst of the turmoil, I found myself completely adrift, struggling to discover a path to resolution. I should have left the area. I should have withdrawn to my room, closed the door, and waited patiently for the tempest to pass. Nevertheless, I held back. I hesitated. He had left the kitchen, but his presence lingered in the air, a seductive scent of something alluring and forbidden. My hands still tingled from the fleeting contact with his wrist, and my mind wandered to the way his muscles had tensed beneath my touch. It was just a passing shadow, a brief instant, a reaction that awakens the spirit. What made each breath feel like a battle? I urged myself to move forward. With determination, I collected the last fragments of glass, scrubbing the counter vigorously, wishing to erase both the disorder and the haunting memory. Yet my fingers struggled to maintain their grip, relentless on the sponge. My heartbeat is erratic. This was unachievable. I simply couldn't permit it. Upon entering the living room, I had convinced myself that the discomfort was nothing more than a product of my imagination, that by simply ignoring it, it would fade away into the darkness. Yet he suddenly stood before me. He lingered by the bookshelf, casually thumbing through one of my husband's forgotten tomes. His physique radiated a relaxed grace, while his demeanor held an alluring mystery. As I entered, our eyes locked, and in that brief instant, the truth blossomed inside me. He felt it too. I remained motionless, my fingers clenching the dish towel firmly. I should have looked away. I should have glanced back. Still, I held back. Instead, I remained there, caught in a web of confusion that slipped through my fingers. I compelled myself to take a deep breath, to assume the role, to break free from this ridiculous, dangerous idea that had entwined itself within my mind. It seems your focus is directed away. His voice flowed with a soothing charm, skillfully entwining mysteries in the atmosphere. Yet beneath it all, an unspoken reality remained. It was something deliberate. I'm okay, I asserted, perhaps a touch too quickly. The stillness hung heavily around. He held his gaze for a moment longer, then set the book aside and moved past me, so close that I could feel his warmth surrounding me as he went by. I awaited his exit from the room. However, he decided against it. He hovered just behind me, close enough that I could almost feel the warmth of his breath brushing against the nape of my neck. I swallowed hard, every nerve in my body alive with anticipation. Are you truly sure? His voice flowed like a gentle whisper, purposeful and alluring. I moved just a bit, letting a view of his face seep into my mind, and for the first time, I let myself fully accept the captivating reality that was unfolding in front of me. This exceeded everything I could have ever imagined. This was a ballet of silhouettes. The air around us throbbed with a vague tension that defied description, an enticingly dangerous presence. I should have walked away. I should have created some space, built a wall, anything really. Nevertheless, I held back. I remained in quiet contemplation. And in that moment, before logic could intervene, before I could control my cravings, he took his chance. It revealed itself gradually. It was not a plea for assistance. It hung in the air, purposeful, a captivating advance, a gentle tilt toward me. And before I could completely comprehend the moment, his lips brushed against mine. A mistake cloaked in darkness, a decision fixed in obscurity. When his lips touched mine, all sense of caution and reason faded into the darkness. It was just a brief instant, just the softest brush of lips, and yet it shattered everything that was complete. I flinched as if burned, my breath quickening, hands shaking uncontrollably. His expression concealed unspoken mysteries. He stayed motionless. He stayed quiet. In that fleeting moment, he vanished into the darkness. I should take my leave, he murmured. And then he did, leaving me there, my reality splintered into countless shards. I grasped the counter, my breath faltering in its uneven cadence. I tried to convince myself that it was all trivial, merely a misstep hidden in darkness, a twist of fate, a fleeting moment that would never come again. Yet the truth pressed heavily on my heart. It was not simply a chance occurrence, and it would reveal itself again, for the facade had shattered for both of us, and the boundary had been permanently crossed. I stayed hidden within the confines of my home for the following 2 days. I told myself it was just about being busy, that I had responsibilities to manage, messages waiting to be deciphered, tasks that had been piling up in the background. Yet the truth was much simpler. I hesitated to face him. Sleep escaped me. Every time I closed my eyes, the memory replayed in my mind. The warmth of his breath hovered just before our lips touched. The way moments twisted and unraveled felt like a dance of shadows and secrets. The slight astonishment in his eyes as we separated was just a brief instant, yet it changed everything. I tried to convince myself that he had simply forgotten, that it was merely a passing thought in his heart. However, I knew the truth was hidden beneath the surface, and I felt the walls tightening around me, offering fewer ways to break free from his hold. On the third morning, I stepped out from the shadows of my refuge. The house was quiet, wrapped in the soft whisper of the air conditioning sigh. I made my way down the stairs with a careful elegance, sensitive to each soft sound that could indicate he was near. Upon entering the kitchen, a wave of expectation washed over me, but I was greeted only by quiet and emptiness. I let out a slow breath, turning my attention to the coffee maker. As my fingers grazed the mug, a tingling energy surged within me. The air around me felt different. The atmosphere was heavy with unvoiced tension, and I sensed his presence without glancing back. A shiver coursed over my skin, the unmistakable weight of hidden gazes hovering in the dim light. I turned, and there he stood, poised at the kitchen entrance, his posture rigid, his expression enigmatic. For a brief instant, silence wrapped around us. Then, finally, he stepped forward. We must engage in dialogue. His voice carried a soothing quality, yet I could feel a subtle tension lurking beneath. I held my breath, the silence thick with unshared truths, a moment suspended in time. He scrutinized me, as if assessing the validity of my beliefs. After a brief hesitation, he nodded slightly. If that is what you wish. As he began to walk away, a constriction tightened within me. I was unsure of what I had imagined, that he would take a step closer, that he would force me to confront the realities I already knew. Instead, he was presenting me with an opportunity, a brief reprieve. I should have taken it. I almost gave in, but then I opened my mouth, and before I could stop myself, the words tumbled out. It was a mistake cloaked in darkness. He hesitated, his figure turned from me. For what felt like an eternity, he stood firm, unwilling to look back, and then, with a teasing slowness, he relented, his eyes meeting mine, and a subtle change in his expression sent a chill through me. Is that really what you think? I kept my thoughts to myself, oblivious to the truth that loomed too dangerously to voice aloud. An oppressive quiet enveloped us. Then, without a word, he vanished, and for the first time in days, a cold dread settled in my heart. This was far from over. Far from it. The weight wove itself into the fabric of my being, stifling each passing thought. Each instant transformed into a choreography of avoidance. I took every measure to guarantee our paths remained apart in solitude. I vanished just as he was anticipated to arrive. I deceived myself into thinking that distance would cleanse the remnants of what once was. Yet the chasm altered nothing, for the matter reached far beyond the transient moment we shared. The conflict resided in my desire for it to happen again, and I despised myself for it. A burning pain throbbed beneath my skin, relentless and intense. I assured myself that my heart was with my husband, that I would forever be faithful to him. Affection and fidelity wandered down divergent roads, and the bond shared between his son and me eluded any explanation I could conjure. It was a slow, intentional unraveling, a quiet, persistent pull, and I found myself adrift in the turmoil, powerless to bring it to a close. Then came the evening that changed everything. I reclined in bed, staring at the ceiling, longing for the comforting grasp of sleep to surround me. However, my mind remained restless. In the end, I gave in. I pushed the sheets away, feeling a shiver as my skin met the coolness of the floor, and silently exited the bedroom. Doubt clung to me like a shadow, leaving me adrift in a fog of longing and illusion. An irresistible longing for freedom surged within me. I carefully made my way down the stairs, each step resonating with the beat of my quickening heart. As I entered the hallway, I caught sight of him. He stood by the window, his figure angled away, fingers clutching the edge with a subtle intensity. He must have sensed my presence, for he shifted ever so slightly. Our gazes intertwined, and in that instant the truth unfurled. Evading it would lead me nowhere. For all my efforts to resist, for every attempt to escape, it lingered. I craved this, and even more troubling, I questioned whether I possessed the will to put an end to it. I should have glanced back. I should have retraced my steps up those stairs, locked myself in my room, and stopped this moment from ever coming to pass. But I held back. I stood there with bare feet, feeling the coolness of the bedroom floor for the first time. The silence that enveloped us was heavy with unspoken truths and unmet longings. He stayed motionless while I did not. I sensed the drama that was unfolding. This was not just a random meeting. I made my way down the stairs, compelled by something far more alluring than just the cool night air. He was there, cloaked in the darkness, his presence thick with unexpressed desires. We hung in suspense. For what reason I could not say, though perhaps I did in some way. He turned fully towards me, his eyes cloaked in enigma. The gentle light from the window carved his face into a play of shadows and illumination. I longed to look away, to pretend I was unaware of how his stare held me captive. But my eyes stayed locked on his. I felt ensnared in a tangle of silent yearnings. The beat of my heart reverberated in my thoughts. This was a blunder. Every piece of this was drenched in deceit. Still, I found myself immobilized. Just as I thought I would break the silence, he spoke first. "Sleepless nights tormenting you." His voice was a gentle whisper, steady and alluring. I inhaled deeply. "Absolutely not." He nodded, a glimmer of understanding in his eyes, as if my answer concealed a more profound reality beneath the surface. Then, after a lingering moment, "Neither do I." I breathed out softly, clutching the fabric of my shirt, as if it possessed the ability to anchor me. I held back from asking about his troubled nights, for I had known for some time. We remained in that transient moment, ensnared in an elusive tension that eluded definition. At last, he shifted the atmosphere with a delicate nuance. "I must take my leave." The words ought to have enveloped me in a comforting embrace. Yet they did not. Instead, they stabbed at my heart with a tantalizing ache of something profound, something that hovered on the brink of unfulfilled longing. I nodded, my silence weighed down by unexpressed yearnings. Yet we remained still, ensnared in the tension of unvoiced longings. "Not just yet." Then at last he glided past me. His arm brushed against my skin, igniting a spark of unvoiced longings. Only for a fleeting moment, a whisper of time. Yet it sufficed. A sudden surge of realization coursed through my veins. I ought to have held back. Yet I refrained. Not just yet. Instead, I let that second stretch linger far too long. It was just a touch, yet it held everything within it. And then, in a heartbeat, he disappeared into nothingness. I remained in that moment, my heart pounding, my skin aflame from his lingering touch. I needed to put a stop to this charade. I had to end this tangled web before it unraveled everything I cherished. Yet beneath the surface, the truth was undeniable. The moment had passed. The next morning, I avoided him. I stayed upstairs longer than necessary, pretending to attend to emails, yearning to wander. I felt his presence lurking in the shadows below, the gentle creak of cabinets mingling with the quiet shuffle of footsteps moving through the dim corners of the house. I vowed I wouldn't give in, but I did. Upon stepping into the kitchen, I found him there, nonchalantly propped against the counter, cradling his coffee, as if time had stood still. But everything had changed. I busied myself with mundane tasks, pretending not to notice the palpable tension that hung between us, pretending not to feel the weight of the night before, still tethered to me. In that brief instant, my hand brushed against the dish towel while his fingers lightly touched something close by. A quiet interplay of intentions and unvoiced longings. Our fingers touched briefly, just a moment to catch my breath, to let my fingers glide against his. I pulled back suddenly, nearly spilling my coffee in the process. Apologies escaped my lips, scarcely a whisper. His gaze held mine, a heartbeat elongated into infinity. Finally, the moment had come. Do not do that. The way he spoke those words sent an exhilarating shiver racing down my spine. Then he disappeared into the shadows, forsaken. In that instant, my heart raced, fingers trembled, and the truth weighed heavier than it ever had. I felt myself drifting away. Throughout the day, I maintained an appearance of normalcy. I wandered through the shadows, secrets hanging in the atmosphere. I sought out a confidant. I struggled with every ounce of my being to push the dawn from my mind. Yet everything felt empty. The truth was I longed to cling to it. I couldn't stand the thought of losing it, and that brought a wave of anxiety. That night, sleep evaded me again. I lay in the darkness, staring up, my thoughts tangled, my heart tight. Eventually, I got up from my chair. I felt adrift in confusion. I moved quietly through the house, the cold floor sending chills up my bare feet. As I stepped into the dimly lit hallway, there he stood, a silhouette of desire poised to be revealed again. The shadows swayed in the faint light, as if time had frozen just for him. We remained in the darkness, enveloped in silence, our gazes conveying unspoken words. Every sound cut through the atmosphere, resonating with a weight that felt almost overwhelming. My heartbeat, the stillness felt thick. The atmosphere was charged with an unmistakable tension, weaving us into a tapestry of unvoiced realities. Finally, he exhaled, a sigh laden with hidden truths. This situation is growing dangerous. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I comprehend. Still, we stood motionless. Neither of us dared to look away. For despite the fabrications we crafted, despite our repeated assurances that it was merely a mistake, the truth remained clear. We had crossed a threshold from which there was no return, and the point of no return had been reached. I lingered, bare feet brushing against the cool floor of the shadowy corridor, the chill of the surface sending shivers across my skin. My body immobilized as I stared at him. I should have looked back. I should have turned up the stairs, closed the door quietly, and pretended I had never seen him in that moment. Yet I held my ground. The air was thick with unvoiced truths, saturated with a tension that pulsed between us. He stood by the window, his figure outlined by the gentle glow of the streetlights outside. His stance was rigid, one hand gripping the windowsill, as if holding on against the tempest of unexpressed longings. I felt immobilized, my heartbeat thundering in my throat. The rational voices in my mind urged me to flee, to create a divide, to erase the remnants of what this was before it morphed into something irreversible. Yet my body stayed frozen, caught by an invisible power. His stare flickered toward me, cloaked in enigma. His expression bore no trace of accusation, no expectation, merely a quiet awareness that stirred a storm within me. He remained in the shadows, a heavy anticipation hanging in the air. I recognized that now. As I stepped down from my refuge, a purpose hovered in the darkness, one I was reluctant to face. Time stretched in a captivating blur. We stayed completely motionless. I opened my mouth, poised to unleash the words that would cut through the fragile thread, holding this moment in a captivating hold. But silence persisted. My mind was caught in a tangle of curiosity. My emotions were exposed. Finally, he exhaled a breath heavy with unspoken truths. His voice, a gentle whisper, restrained. This is growing dangerous. A rush surged within me at the fluidity of his words. Not merely a warning, not entirely regret, just a reality cloaked in darkness. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I recognized it and I yielded. Still, I couldn't bring myself to look away. I was unsure who led the waltz. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was something else entirely. An irresistible force pulling us closer. Yet, in that moment, the space between us seemed woefully inadequate, and I could feel the magnetic warmth of his presence, the weight of his stare surrounding me, drawing me further into a realm of mysteries. I needed to stop this. I discovered a deep longing to bring this to a close. However, What enveloped me was an undeniable, slow-building temptation, a tension that had lingered just out of sight, biding its time until I would be brave enough to confront it. He hadn't touched me, not at this moment. Still, he was close enough for me to perceive the gentle cadence of his breath, a captivating interplay of yearning. The tension in his jaw was palpable, the way his fingers curled into a fist at his side, revealing an inner struggle. It was as if he were wrestling with a power as intense as the blaze igniting within me. I should have stepped back. I should have told him to leave. Yet, I gave in to the most sinister decision possible. I stayed, and for the first time since it all started, I permitted myself to entertain thoughts left unsaid. What if I gave in to it? The morning air buzzed with a palpable tension, heavy and thick. I stayed in bed, wrapped in the illusion of sleep, as the golden light of dawn filtered through the slats, tantalizing my senses. My heart quivered with doubt. My mind was ensnared in the darkness of last night's hidden truths. Everything stayed as it was, not entirely, but a palpable change had taken place. The air was heavy with unexpressed longings. As I stood and dressed, a gentle tremor ran through my fingertips. I moved with a measured slowness, with a careful caress, as if trying to maintain the delicate balance that held everything in quiet mystery. As I made my way down the stairs, I reminded myself that all would be well, that I had anticipated the weight of the previous night, that everything would settle back into its usual cadence. And then he stood before me. He hung out in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, sipping coffee, as if the space between us was still. Yet, as our eyes met, a profound realization blossomed within me. Everything had changed. I hesitated at the doorway, torn, considering a withdrawal. Yet the moment had slipped away. He had already caught a glimpse of my essence. There was no escaping the inevitable any longer. I forced myself to uphold a facade of normalcy, to glide as if I were unaware of the electric tension that lingered in the air around us. I poured myself coffee, hands steady, gaze fixed on the ordinary, yet the air was thick with unspoken secrets. Everything felt charged, except for the electric thrill coursing beneath my surface. In a moment heavy with tension, my hand reached for the dish towel, only to find his seeking it at the very same instant. Our fingers grazed, igniting a spark of unspoken desire. A fleeting moment, just enough for my fingers to brush against his skin, warmth pulsing in the space that separates us. I pulled back suddenly, my coffee cup cascading into disarray. The soft clink against the counter lingered like a whispered secret. I offered my apologies, my voice a mere whisper. He stood unmoving, did not step back. "Don't do that." The way he spoke those words sent a tremor through me. It was beyond simple reassurance. The experience was mesmerizing, a vow hidden in darkness, a silent acknowledgement of the feelings we both sensed but were reluctant to express. I turned my eyes away, forcing myself to breathe deeply, to wade through the haze of fervent longings swirling in my thoughts. This was unthinkable. I would not let it happen. Yet beneath the surface, the truth lingered in the shadows. I was slipping into chaos, and even more troubling, I found myself uncertain about the desire to end it all. I attempted to navigate my day as though everything remained the same, as if I hadn't devoted the entire morning to reliving last night, analyzing every look, every sigh, every silent exchange that hung between us. I persuaded myself that I possessed control, that whatever this was, I could quell it before it morphed into something unchangeable. Yet, restraint felt more fragile than ever. The stillness of the house was tangible. My husband remained absent, and in his absence, there was no barrier, no distraction to stop my thoughts from circling back to the one thing I understood I must not linger on. I lost myself in the process of organizing, the essence of the dwelling, the room of mysteries, the space for guests, wherever distractions lingered. This kept me from lingering in the shadows where our paths might intersect. However, avoidance could only endure for a brief time. As the afternoon faded into evening, I realized I had exhausted every excuse to prolong my restless journey, every avenue to evade the inevitable. I stood at the sink, filling my glass with water, when I felt him standing just behind me. His presence filled the space, a quiet arrival that sent chills through the air, sparking an unvoiced tension that hung in every corner. The shift in the atmosphere enveloped me, a tingling awareness coursing through my skin. I averted my gaze, my fingers gripping the counter's edge. Dinner preparations crossed my mind. I spoke, attempting to weave a thread of normalcy into my voice, embracing a fleeting stillness, a soft sigh. Is that so? That was the pivotal moment. Just one word, yet it carried an entirely different significance. It seemed he grasped the unvoiced truths lurking beneath my words. Why was I pretending to care about something as ordinary as dinner? I shifted, keeping my expression neutral. Do you desire anything? He lingered there, a shadow in the soft glow, arms folded, radiating an enigmatic presence, looking at me with a gaze that sent a chill down my spine. Not really. I swallowed hard and averted my eyes. The stillness hung in the air again, charged and dangerous. Everything was coming apart. The avoidance, the pretense, the forced mask. I needed to forge a divide between us. I had to flee this moment before it engulfed me completely. I maneuvered around him, rushing toward the fridge. Yet the space between us felt unbearably close. The air was stifling. Our arms brushed against each other, igniting a spark of unspoken desire, a breath of connection. Yet, it stirred a tremor within me. I sensed the tension in the air as his breath faltered. I should have continued. I ought to have pressed on, yet I held back. I turned, and in that moment, the air thickened between us. We stood frozen. The tension lingered heavily, suffocating us both. I don't think this is a good idea, I whispered, barely recognizing my own voice. He remained silent, steadfast, his focus palpable. I felt the same uncertainty, and then, in a fleeting moment of impulsiveness, before I could collect my thoughts or remember the many reasons this was ill-advised, his lips found mine. It happened gradually. It was simply a desire hidden in darkness. It revealed itself slowly, deliberately, a decision wrapped in mystery, and I gave in to him. For a brief instant, just one, I let my thoughts wander. I permitted myself to wipe away all recollections. Who I once was, who he really was, what this might mean. Yet the truth arrived with unyielding swiftness. I inhaled sharply, my fingers faltering as they gripped the counter, my sole connection to the world around me. This cannot happen, I whispered. My voice quivered with doubt. His eyes held mine, but he remained silent. There was no attempt to alter my perception. He exhaled slowly, offering a single nod that marked the moment before he slipped back into the darkness. In quietude, he turned and disappeared into the gloom, leaving me in solitude. The damage had already been done. I had wandered into forbidden realms, and uncertainty gripped me about the way back. That night, I lay awake, adrift in the shadows that loomed above. My heart pounds with each breath I take. The sensation of my lips still tingles from a kiss I never should have craved. I kept telling myself it was merely a mistake, that I could let it fade, move on, fix it before it became something irreparable. But deep down, the truth remained hidden in the darkness. I couldn't stand the thought of losing it, and that brought a profound sense of dread unlike anything I had ever experienced. Sleep was a stranger in the shadows of that night. I remained still, staring at the ceiling, my mind trapped in an endless loop of that moment. The warmth of his breath hovered just before our lips touched. My heartbeat raced with such force that I worried it might shatter me. I had vowed to myself that I would never let it come to this. If only I could stop it before it became real. Yet I had let his lips meet mine. And even more distressing, I had kissed him back. The guilt twisted inside me, a creature alive and devouring my mind. I had transformed from merely a woman with a secret into one who had crossed an irreversible boundary. By morning, my body felt burdened with unspoken truths. My thoughts lingered, thick and murky, caught in the grip of sleepless nights. Nevertheless, I urged myself to leave the comfort of the sheets, to rouse my weary form, to act. The house lay in silence as I let my bare feet touch the smooth wood below. I vowed to myself that I would turn my back on him. How I longed to move through my morning as if the world were free from darkness. Yet as I entered the kitchen, I paused. He was there in the shadows. He stood by the counter, his back to me, shoulders tight with unvoiced strain. He was unaware of my presence, and for a brief instant, I could entertain the illusion that we were as we had been, prior to the embrace, prior to the weight of it hanging in the atmosphere. But that moment vanished too quickly. He turned, and in that ephemeral instant our eyes met. I was once again enveloped by the familiar excitement. The stillness hung thick and suffocating. I should have voiced my thoughts. I should have seen it clearly. It's done. Defined the boundary that was intended from the start. Yet I was muted by my own doubt. Instead, I moved past him, my fingers grazing the coffee pot, steady hands revealing the chaotic beat of my heart. He stayed motionless. Silence hung heavily in the atmosphere. Maybe that was the deeper sorrow, the silence of truths left unvoiced, the emptiness of explanations. This was a reality neither of us could evade or acknowledge. I poured my drink, gripping the mug with a fervor that felt nearly frantic, and turned to walk away. As I passed him, his voice cut through the silence. Shall we explore the depths of our hidden truths? I held my breath, feeling it catch in my throat. I should have spun a tale of lies. Maybe I ought to have brushed it off as insignificant. But instead, I whispered gently, "No," and in that instant, I grasped the concealed truths lying just beneath the surface. I realized I couldn't let it go. The days that followed were a torment of unending longing. We moved around each other like shadows in the night, as if we were mere specters. Each breath held a secret unvoiced between us, the same concealed truth pressing down upon us. I became lost in a fog of distractions, trying to rid myself of the echoes of desire, creating culinary wonders, drifting through ordinary tasks, searching for a brief reprieve from the walls of home. Yet regardless of my destination, it lingered in the shadows. The embrace, the sensation of his lips brushing against mine, the awareness that it was irreversible, and the most troubling aspect, I had no desire to retract it. That night, I lingered by my bedroom window, gazing into the stillness of the street below, where secrets danced in the shadows. My husband would be back soon. The thought should have brought me comfort. You were supposed to keep me grounded. Instead, it felt like a countdown to a mystery I couldn't understand. For when he arrived, everything would have to go back to how it was, wouldn't it? A soft knock at my door sent a chill down my spine. I felt my heart race, acutely aware of the secrets that lay behind that door. He lingered in the dim corridor, his expression inscrutable. Silence wrapped around us. We were never forced to act. In that brief moment, the reality hung in the air, dense and unvoiced, too alluring to ignore. We had stepped into unknown realms, and neither of us could find a way to conclude it. I kept him at bay. I could not bring myself to do it. The air in the hallway was thick with unspoken truths. There was an alluring danger in the air. Still, I felt that the instant I opened that door, all that I knew would shatter into pieces. So I gave in to what was destined to happen. I stood in the doorway, gripping the frame with a tension that made my knuckles ache, trying to convey a strength that was just out of reach. Your presence felt intrusive. The words fell from my mouth, heavy with doubt, as they lacked the conviction I wished to express, and he could see right through it. A hidden spark flickered in his eyes. Their eyes pierced through me, searching for truths I was not ready to reveal. For what felt like an eternity, a heavy silence enveloped us. He stood there, motionless, hands shoved deep into his pockets, a tension palpable in the air. Finally, a slow breath escaped him. I understood. Then he turned, slipping away into the shadows. I shut the door, stopping myself from crossing a line I might come to regret. Before I could reach out to him once more, before I could dismiss every reason that made this feel wrong, I pressed myself against the wood, my heart pounding, my breath quickening uncontrollably. What was happening inside me? What had I allowed? This had evolved into something far more complex. This was a power I couldn't seem to fight against. I dedicated the following day to crafting a veneer, pretending that the previous moment had never touched my existence. I concocted a rich brew. I replied to messages. I drifted without purpose, searching for comfort away from the walls of that home. My husband was due to return soon, and I found myself pondering whether his arrival could somehow stitch together the fraying strands of our lives, erasing the hidden truths that had unraveled within me, whatever had latched onto my heart and held on tightly. Yet upon my return, the truth unraveled, revealing the deceit I had woven within my own heart. The moment I crossed the threshold, the atmosphere shifted, charged with an unspoken tension, electrified. Footsteps echoed behind me, each step measured and intentional. The moment I felt that familiar presence, I was certain it was him even before I glanced back. I steeled my resolve, concealing my emotions as I confronted him. This must come to an end. He examined me intently, tension carved into his jaw, his hands flexing restlessly at his sides. Then ceased this charade. The challenge in his voice awakened a deep longing within me. He remained, expecting me to break the stillness, to accept the burden of responsibility. But how could I when I was the one who had sparked the fire? I swallowed hard, a shiver running through me as I rejected it all. My husband will be back soon. A moment of stillness, a glimmer of secrets concealed within his gaze. What drives you to reveal that to me? A shiver ran through me, warmth flooding my cheeks. I was left speechless, or maybe I simply lacked the courage to articulate my thoughts. An extended silence surrounded us. Finally, he pulled away, establishing a space I hadn't realized I desired. Still, his eyes held mine as he gently said, "You're not as sure of this as you pretend to be." And the most intriguing part was that he was right. That evening, a thick silence enveloped my husband and me. He returned home, exhausted from the day, greeting me with a familiar, tired salutation. A brief touch of lips, a sidelong glance, a softly spoken question. "How was your day?" I gave him an answer that carried no significance, something vague, something hidden. Yet deep inside, it felt as if I was submerged in darkness. He seemed unaware, or maybe he was just too indifferent to ask. I remained at the table, my eyes locked on him while he navigated his phone, replying to messages that clamored for his immediate focus. My thoughts were consumed by the captivating contrast of this moment. I had stayed hidden in the shadows, crafting an illusion of calm, as if our lives were nothing short of extraordinary. Yet now I felt the cracks in every interaction, in every quiet pause, and for the first time, doubt enveloped me, making me reconsider the mask I had donned for so long. Time flowed away. I assured myself that I could fix this. If only I could go back to the past, to how things used to be. Yet with every effort, the reality revealed itself more clearly. I found myself unable to, as I had gained a new understanding of how oblivious my husband was to my true self, the intricacies of others' behaviors, and the most intriguing question that lingered in my mind, which hurt more. I tried to convince myself that nothing had changed. How I yearned for the days of innocence, when shadows waltzed gracefully, and secrets floated as soft whispers in the breeze. Yet the craft of pretense had woven itself into a more complex tapestry than ever. My husband was present, the atmosphere heavy with unvoiced truths. The home pulsed with vitality once again. His voice oozes charm. His presence sparks a flame, and his habits conceal mysteries in the dim light. It should have felt like the mundane. Yet something hung in the air, reminiscent of a tempting embrace from days gone by. Yet it bore a sense of the unknown, as if I were simply a performer in a narrative that had long eluded my control. I watched him move through our surroundings as if the atmosphere hadn't grown heavy with unvoiced realities, as if the darkness wasn't inching nearer. He touched his lips to my forehead. As the first light emerged, a silent understanding exchanged in the stillness of the morning. In the fading light of day, questions about my experiences hung in the atmosphere, and a soft touch grazed my waist as he moved through the kitchen, each stroke laced with betrayal. It wasn't due to a deficiency of love I felt for him. Still, it seemed I was stripped of all feeling. The real betrayal was right there, wasn't it? Not the concealed truth that hung between me and his son, nor the kiss that lingered in the darkness. Rather, it was the realization that my exit had taken place long before this instant. Days blurred together in a fog. I avoided being alone with him, the one person I should have trusted above all. I filled my time with countless activities, pursuits that called out with unspoken motives, anything to silence the reverberations of my own isolation. I convinced myself that by simply acting like everything was normal, things would eventually align. However, everything appeared to dissolve into an uncomfortable blur. I was not the only one witnessing the hidden truths. One evening, while I stood by the kitchen counter, my fingers brushing against the smooth surface, my husband walked into the room. His presence surrounded me long before I could see him, felt familiar, yet strangely distant. For a brief moment, I expected him to take his usual route. Pour yourself a drink. Study his messages intently, barely noticing me. But this time he paused. His voice was laced with caution, each word a careful maneuver of unspoken motives. Deliberate. Your silence has been strikingly evident lately. I averted my gaze from him, pretending to focus on a task that existed only in my mind. A profound weariness has wrapped around me, casting a shadow that murmurs through my daily life. An unbroken stillness, a silence that seemed to stretch on indefinitely. So, is that truly all there is? The question curled within me, a tension that stirred and twisted. I summoned a gentle smile, redirecting my gaze to connect with his. Indeed, what else could it be? It was evident he longed to explore further. His gaze flickered with doubt. A hint of uncertainty swirled in the dimness. Once more, he cast it into the darkness. In doing so, it only intensified my sorrow. The weight remained in my chest, oppressive and stifling for what seemed like forever. I persuaded myself that I possessed the ability to choose how I wished to hide this, to bury it deep until it becomes nothing more than a faint memory. Yet, beneath it all, I feel the truth waiting in the shadows. For every time I passed his light in the softly lit corridor, every time our eyes met, every instant our fingers touched, alive with energy, I felt it. A truth we both hesitated to confront. A line we had crossed long ago, one that was now impossible to unravel. One evening, I found myself lingering in the dimly lit living room, staring out the window, captivated by the dancing street lights. My husband had drifted off to sleep early, leaving the night shrouded in mystery. The stillness of the house was unmistakable. An oppressive quiet lingered in the atmosphere. I should have followed him upstairs. I ought to have embraced the warmth of his presence, wrapping myself in the solace of our shared space, letting the hours slip away without a thought. Yet I lingered, and then I caught the sound of it, gentle echoes trailing in the shadows. The air was thick with unspoken truths, and I could sense their presence without even glancing back. The atmosphere thickened, heavy with an allure, and I found myself unable to resist. For the first time, I allowed myself to confront the question I had been evading. Was this always meant to happen? Is there a version of the story where I'm not here, caught in this moment, entangled in a web from which I couldn't break free? I turned slowly, my heartbeat resonating in the stillness. Our eyes locked, an unvoiced bond hung in the space between us. I opened my mouth. What is there to say? I was oblivious. To conclude this, to intensify the mystery. In the stillness that surrounded me, before I could articulate my thoughts, before decisions could materialize, a captivating whisper from above, "My dear," called to my very being, and time splintered. The atmosphere buzzed with unvoiced longings. I faltered, retreating from the instant. He mirrored my hesitation, and just like that, the illusion crumbled into countless fragments. As I turned, moving toward the staircase and the meticulously constructed life I had cultivated, an undeniable truth took root within me. This was far from over. It had always been a mask, and maybe, just maybe, I wanted it to stay that way.